The child's death. The colony of Ardent Prime was small but bright. A world with blue skies and green fields where human families lived far from Earth. Children played in the dusty streets of the main settlement, laughing while their parents worked on farms and machines. Life was simple, and for many years it was safe, but safety in the galaxy was always fragile. And on that day, everything changed. A shadow crossed the sky, a warship descending through the atmosphere. The emblem of the Galactic Empire gleamed. On its hull, a symbol feared by countless worlds. When the ship landed, its engines scorched the fields, and soldiers in black armor marched out. Their faces were hidden by masks, their voices cold and cruel. They shouted orders in a language many colonists barely understood. The people froze, fear sinking into their bones, for they knew the Empire brought nothing but pain. Among the crowd stood a small child, no older than 8, with wide eyes and a dirt-stained shirt. The child clutched a wooden toy soldier, a gift from his father who was working off-world. His mother tried to pull him back, whispering for him to stay quiet, but the child's young heart did not know fear like the others. He saw the soldiers pushing people, knocking an old man to the ground, and he stepped forward, his tiny voice shouting, "Stop!" The soldiers turned, the entire crowd gasping. One soldier laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. He walked over to the child, towering above him. "Do you defy the Empire, little insect?" The soldier sneered. The child's hands trembled, but his voice did not break. "My people are not insects," he said, clutching his toy tighter. The soldier raised his weapon, the barrel glowing with deadly energy. The mother screamed, running forward, but other soldiers held her back. The crowd shouted, cried, begged for mercy, but mercy was not in the Empire's heart. A single blast lit the square. The child's body fell to the ground, the toy soldier rolling into the dust. Silence swallowed the people, broken only by the mother's screams. The soldiers laughed again, mocking human weakness. "Remember this," the leader said, his voice echoing over the loudspeaker. "This is the fate of those who stand against the Empire." What the soldiers did not know was that their cruelty had already been recorded. Small cameras built into the colony walls had captured every second: the child's defiance, the soldier's sneer, the final shot. All of it was sent across the colony's secure network. And from there, it traveled. It spread like wildfire through the human colonies. And finally, it reached Earth. On Earth, billions watched in silence as the footage played. They saw the small child holding his toy. They heard his last brave words. And they saw the Empire's laughter. Grief turned to rage. And rage turned into something older, something buried deep in the human soul. In one night, the name of the child became a symbol. Posters filled streets, showing his face. Children in schools whispered his name with pride. Soldiers touched the screen with clenched fists, vowing vengeance. Mothers held their children tighter, swearing that no alien empire would ever take them. And across every human world, people began to rise. The death of one child had lit a fire no empire could ever put out. Back on Ardent Prime, the soldiers left as quickly as they had come. They thought the colony was broken, beaten into silence, but the people were not silent. They carried the toy soldier, stained with dust and blood, and they built a shrine for the boy in the center of the square. Every colonist came to bow their head. Every tear that fell was another promise. And above the shrine, they carved words in stone. They killed a child, but they woke humanity. The galaxy did not know it yet, but a storm was coming, a storm born from love, pain, and wrath. The Empire believed the act was small. They thought no one would rise for a single child, but they were wrong. They had made a mistake that would burn across the stars. For the child was gone, but Earth would never forgive, and Earth would never forget. The message reaches Earth on Earth. The great cities never slept. Lights glowed across continents. Ships soared through the skies, and people moved with the rhythm of a world at peace. But on that night, everything stopped. Screens across the planet lit up with a single message. It came from a small colony called Ardent Prime. The footage was raw, unedited, and horrifying. It began with soldiers landing in the square, their armor shining black under the sun. It showed the colonists forced into silence. Then the camera focused on a small child, standing with nothing but a toy soldier in his hand. Billions watched in silence as the child spoke. "My people are not insects," the child said, his voice shaking but strong. And then the shot rang out. The body fell, the toy rolled, and the laughter of the Empire filled the air. On Earth, there was silence, not the silence of fear, but the silence of hearts breaking all at once. Mothers turned away. Fathers clenched their fists. Children cried without knowing why. And then the silence broke. It broke into a storm. Crowds filled the streets. People shouted. People wept. And people demanded one word: justice. In the government halls of New Geneva, leaders argued. Some said to hold back, to send protests, to avoid war. Others slammed their fists on the table, demanding immediate retaliation. But while politicians argued, the people already decided. The will of billions moved faster than law. Everywhere, the child's face appeared on walls, on banners, on digital screens. He was no longer just a boy from Ardent Prime. He was every human child, every symbol of innocence crushed by tyranny. Admiral Marcus Halley sat in a dim war room. Beneath the Atlantic, he had retired once, believing humanity's wars were behind them. But as he watched the footage replay again and again, his hands trembled. He saw not just a child, but his own grandson. He rose from his chair, his voice steady as steel. "The Empire thinks we are weak," he said to his gathered officers. "They think we will stay silent as they murder our children." He leaned forward, his eyes burning with rage. "But they will learn. They will learn what it means to wake humanity." In the factories of Mars, the machines roared to life. Workers built ships day and night. On the moons of Jupiter, hidden shipyards opened their gates, revealing vessels long kept in shadow. Massive carriers, silent for decades, powered up. With a low thunder, the stars themselves seemed to tremble as old weapons awakened. Ordinary people joined too. Veterans who had sworn never to fight again walked into recruitment halls. Young men and women signed their names, shouting the child's name as their oath. Farmers from colonies sent food. Engineers sent machines. Doctors prepared for war. Humanity was moving as one, not for conquest, but for vengeance. News spread fast, faster than the Empire ever believed possible. Other alien races watched in silence. Some whispered that Earth was reckless. Others whispered something else fear. For they had heard the legends that humans were deathworlders, born from a world of storms and fire, that humans had survived things that would kill most species, that when humans were pushed too far, they did not break, they burned. In the Galactic Council, alien leaders laughed at first. They called it a tantrum, a cry from a primitive species. "Let them rage," one said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "They will learn their place, as they always have." But then the reports began to arrive. Reports of human fleets moving, reports of colonies raising armies, reports of weapons no one had seen in centuries. The laughter began to fade, replaced by unease. Back on Earth, the boy's mother was brought before the council of leaders. Her eyes were red, her face pale, her voice weak but unbroken. She carried the toy soldier her son had held, its wooden edges scorched by dust. She placed it on the table, a sound echoing louder than any speech. "This is what they took from me," she said, her voice trembling. "But this is what they gave humanity." Her words spread across the galaxy, replayed 1,000 times, and every time it was heard, humanity's wrath grew stronger. The Empire thought the death of a child meant nothing, but to Earth, it meant Everything, the Empire thought the humans would bow, but instead they would rise. The fire had been lit, and soon it would burn across the stars. Asterisk. Wrath awakened. The day the war machines moved, the stars themselves seemed to change. Across Earth, oceans split as massive carriers rose from beneath the waves. They had been sleeping in silence, hidden for decades under the waters. Waiting for the day they were needed, their steel hulls dripped with salt as the sun struck their surfaces. Engines hummed, weapons powered, and crews cheered. Humanity's vengeance was no longer a dream. It was becoming real in the frozen. Mountains of Siberia, doors carved into the rock opened. From deep underground, railgun batteries rolled into the daylight, each cannon longer than a skyscraper. Built to fire projectiles at speeds faster than light, the people who had built them never thought they would see them fired. Yet here they were, dust brushed off, wires humming with power. The old guardians of Earth were waking. On Mars, the red factories thundered. Forge fires lit the sky as workers assembled ships piece by piece. Young men and women worked with bleeding hands, but they did not stop. Every bolt they tightened, every plate they welded, felt like vengeance for the child. Across the moons of Jupiter, massive hangars opened, revealing fleets that had been hidden in the ice. Warships with names like Justice, Vengeance, and Eternal Dawn, they lit their engines. Burning bright against the black void, the Galactic Empire sent spies to watch. They reported back with disbelief. These humans, they are not preparing defenses. One whispered, they are preparing an attack. The Empire laughed at first, but then came the first strike. In the dark edges of the border, a human fleet appeared. At its head was the carrier Iron Resolve, its guns glowing faint red. Empire patrol ships moved to intercept, their commanders mocking the primitive fleet. But when the first human railgun fired, the galaxy changed. The shot cut through the void faster than anyone expected. It pierced the Empire's flagship, splitting it in two. The explosion lit the stars like a second sun. The battle was over in minutes. Every Empire ship reduced to wreckage. Every human ship still standing. News traveled fast. For centuries, the Empire had ruled through fear. Worlds obeyed because they believed. Resistance was hopeless. But now they saw something new. They saw human warships cutting through the Empire's navy as if it were paper. They saw the child's death answered by fire, and they began to whisper, "The humans are coming." On Earth, Admiral Marcus Heil stood before the War Council. He placed a map of the galaxy on the table. Red lights marked every Empire stronghold. Green lights marked human fleets moving outward. His voice was steady, but his eyes were filled with steel. "This is not just a war," he said. "This is justice." The council listened, some with fear, some with pride, but no one doubted. Anymore, the wrath of Earth was awake, and nothing would stop it. In the colonies, the people rose. On mining worlds, workers threw down their chains, arming themselves with stolen weapons. On farming moons, families sent food and supplies to the fleets. On research stations, scientists worked day and night, upgrading ships with new weapons. Everyone was part of the war. Everyone carried the memory of the child. The Empire underestimated humanity. They had always thought humans were fragile, slow to act, and easy to break. But humans were not like other races. Humans came from a death world forged by storms, fire, hunger, and war. When pushed too far, they did not crumble. They became fire. And now that fire was spreading across the stars, the Galactic Council, watching from their distant chambers, grew nervous. They had mocked Earth for years. Now they whispered to each other, afraid. "What if the humans cannot be stopped?" one asked. "What if their vengeance consumes us all?" But no answer came, for no one had ever seen humanity like this before. United, furious, and unstoppable, the child's name, once spoken in grief, was now shouted in battle. Every soldier painted it on their armor. Every ship carried it on their hull. He was the symbol, the spark, the reason, and as fleets moved outward, one message spread from world to world, a message carved into banners, screens, and hearts. They killed one of ours. Now none of theirs are safe. The galaxy trembled, not because of numbers, not because of weapons, but because of something far older, something primal, the wrath of Earth. Once awakened, it would not stop until justice was done. Asterisk, the Empire's panic, the Galactic Empire, had ruled for thousands of years. Its banners stretched across countless worlds. Its fleets patrolled every star lane. Its governors ruled with cruelty and arrogance. But now, for the first time in history, the Empire felt fear. Reports poured into the imperial capital. Border fleets destroyed, colonies lost, supply lines cut. Every message carried the same warning: the humans are coming. At first, the High Lords dismissed it. They are a minor race, a noisy species. From a single world, one sneered. They cannot harm the Empire, another laughed. But the laughter grew thinner each day, because every new report was worse than the last. In the war chambers of the capital, generals stood around glowing. Star maps, red dots blinked and vanished, one after another. Entire fleets gone? One general whispered, his voice breaking. Yes, came the answer. In minutes. The counselors shook their heads in disbelief. How can they strike so fast? Their technology is beneath ours. But they did not understand. Humans had. Never relied on shiny technology alone. They relied on grit, on strategy, on the will to fight until the last breath. On occupied worlds, the panic spread even faster. Alien civilians had lived under the Empire's boot for centuries. They had obeyed, not from loyalty, but from fear. But now they saw human fleets burning the skies. They saw imperial ships crumble like paper, and whispers spread through the streets. The humans will free us. The Empire tried to crush these whispers, but fear could not silence hope. In the throne chamber, the Emperor himself listened to the reports. He sat high upon a seat of black stone, surrounded by guards. His face was calm, but his hands trembled. He had never feared another race before, but the humans were different. They were not fighting for conquest. They were fighting for vengeance, and vengeance was something the Emperor understood. He leaned forward, his voice sharp. Summon every fleet, summon every soldier, summon every weapon. He commanded. We will drown their fire in blood. But his generals knew the truth. Numbers would not be enough. For every world that resisted, 10 more rose to rebellion. For every human ship destroyed, 3 more appeared. It was like fighting the tide. The harder they struck, the stronger the resistance became. On the Empire's frontier, panic grew into chaos. Governors begged for reinforcements. Soldiers deserted their posts. Some worlds even opened their gates willingly to the humans. They surrendered not out of fear, but out of choice. For the humans did not enslave. They destroyed the empires. Chains, and where the humans walked, freedom followed. In the capital, fear turned into desperation. Alien merchants fled the markets. Ships clogged the spaceports. Families packed their belongings, running to safer worlds. But no world was safe anymore. Because wherever the Empire raised its banners, humanity tore them down, and every banner that fell made the galaxy whisper louder. The Empire is dying. The Emperor grew furious. In secret meetings, he blamed his generals. He executed officers in front of their peers. He demanded new weapons, new strategies, new answers, but nothing worked. Because the humans were not fighting like the Empire. They did not fight for land or for wealth. They fought with something far more dangerous. They fought with memory. They fought with wrath. They fought for the child. Admiral Marcus Halley knew this truth. When he addressed his fleet, his words spread through every channel. We do not fight for conquest, he said, his voice steady. "We fight for every child who deserves to live free." The soldiers shouted, the crews cheered, and the Empire trembled, because they could not understand a war fought for something so pure. The panic spread to the Galactic Council. Leaders of other species watched in silence. They remembered their own worlds, enslaved and broken by the Empire. Now they saw humanity rise, and deep down they wondered, will the humans free? You, S2? But along with hope came fear. If they can destroy the Empire, one whispered, what will they do to us? No answer came, for no one had ever seen humans like this before, and no one knew how far their wrath would burn. Back in the capital, the Emperor stood alone in his throne room. The walls shook with the sound of distant riots. He looked at the stars painted across the ceiling, once symbols of his endless power, now symbols of the fire coming for him. His voice cracked as he whispered, all this for one child? And deep inside, he already knew the answer. Yes, for one child, humanity would burn the galaxy. Asterisk, asterisk. Fire across the galaxy. The galaxy had always lived in the shadow of the Empire. World after world had bowed to its soldiers, its fleets, and its cruelty. But now the shadow was breaking. Now the fire of humanity was spreading, and everywhere the flames touched, the galaxy changed. On the outer rim, fleets of human warships appeared. Their engines roared, their guns burned, their banners carried the face of the fallen child. The first strike shattered an imperial stronghold on the world. Of Dravos, the sky burned red as railgun rounds tore through fortress walls. Civilians watched in shock as imperial soldiers dropped their weapons. Some surrendered, some ran, but none stood their ground. For the humans came with a fury the Empire had never faced before. On the mining colony of Teros, rebels who had hidden in caves for generations rose to the surface. When the humans arrived, they were greeted not with fear, but with cheers. Banners of rebellion, long kept hidden, were raised into the sky. Children painted the name of the human child on their walls. The message was clear: humanity's fire was not just vengeance. It was a signal, a call to rise, world by world. The Empire's grip loosened. On Velaris Prime, enslaved workers turned. On their masters, they stole weapons. They stormed the governor's palace. When the humans landed, the palace gates were already broken. On Silex Station, Imperial officers fled before the battle even began. They left behind uniforms, medals, and empty halls. The humans walked in without firing a shot. The Empire was rotting from within, and humanity's fire only burned the cracks wider. Admiral Marcus Hawley watched from the bridge of the Iron Resolve. His fleet spread across the stars, victorious at every front, but his face carried no joy, only grim focus. We have started the fire, he said, his voice steady. But we must burn it until nothing remains. His officers saluted, their eyes burning with the same resolve, for every one of them carried the child's image in their hearts. Every battle was personal. Every victory was justice. The Empire tried to strike back. They sent their grand fleets, thousands of ships strong, but numbers meant nothing. The humans fought like predators unleashed. They struck fast, cut deep, vanished, then returned even stronger. Empire commanders were baffled. They do not fight by rules. One shouted before his ship exploded, but that was the truth. Humans did not fight by the Empire's rules. They fought to win, whatever the cost. Soon, the panic spread beyond the Empire itself. The Galactic Council watched in horror as reports flooded their chambers. Human fleets were unstoppable. The Empire's worlds were falling like dominoes. The counselors whispered in fear, if the humans defeat the Empire, who will stand against them? But others whispered something different. Maybe they will free us too, for the galaxy had not seen freedom in centuries. And now, hope rode on human warships. In the streets of conquered cities, ordinary people began to chant, not just humans. But aliens too. They chanted the child's name. They carried his face on banners. What began as Earth's grief was now the galaxy's rebellion. The Empire could not kill the symbol. For every world they tried to silence, 10 more shouted louder. From the deepest mines to the tallest spires, the galaxy echoed with a single truth. The Empire was breaking, and it was breaking because of one act of cruelty, one child's defiance. One shot that lit a fire too vast to ever be contained. The Emperor raged in his palace. He ordered executions. He ordered purges. He ordered fire upon his own people. But even his loyal soldiers began to falter. They looked into the skies and whispered, "The humans will come." And in their hearts, they already knew the outcome. In one broadcast that spread across the stars, Admiral Hall spoke again. His face was stern, his voice unshaken. "We do not come to conquer," he said. "We come to burn away tyranny." His words reached billions, and billions believed him, for the fire of Earth was no longer just vengeance. It was justice, and justice burned hotter than any empire. Fleet could withstand. The galaxy trembled, not from fear of the Empire, but from the roar of humanity. Worlds once silent now shouted with courage. The fire was everywhere, and it was only growing stronger. The Empire's age was ending. The age of humanity had begun. Asterisk the final reckoning. The skies above the empires. Throne world had never known fear. For centuries, fleets had guarded it. Millions of soldiers had sworn to protect it, and billions had believed it untouchable. But now, as the horizon glowed with the light of approaching human ships, the untouchable world trembled from orbit. The fleets of Earth appeared like a storm. Carriers darkened the stars. Destroyers prowled in perfect formation, and railgun platforms shimmered with power. The largest fleet humanity had ever gathered now surrounded the heart of the Empire, and at its center stood the flagship, Iron Resolve, with Admiral Marcus Hawley at the helm. On the planet below, the Imperial Palace glittered, with towers of stone and glass, but its walls shook with riots. Citizens who had once bowed now rose in fury. They shouted the child's name. They carried banners of defiance. They stormed checkpoints. The Empire's guards tried to hold them back, but their hearts were broken. Even within the palace itself, whispers spread. The humans are here. In a council chamber, the Emperor stood surrounded by trembling advisors. His face was pale, his voice sharp. Summon the fleets, summon the armies, hold them back at all costs. He demanded, but no fleet came, no army answered, because most had already been destroyed, and those who remained no longer believed. The Emperor's words echoed in empty silence. Above the planet, Admiral Hawley gave the order. "Begin the strike," he said, his voice steady. The first railgun. Rounds descended like falling stars. They shattered defense platforms, tore through shield grids, and silenced the Empire's proudest cannons. Explosions rippled across the skies, turning night into blazing fire. Within hours, the throne world was defenseless. The Emperor, refusing to believe it, staggered to the balcony of his palace. He looked up at the sky, once filled with imperial banners, now filled with fire. His lips trembled, his crown heavy. All this for one child? He whispered again, and deep in his heart, he knew the answer was yes. On the ground, human troops landed. They marched through streets filled with smoke and fire, but the people did not resist them. Instead, they welcomed them. Alien civilians ran forward, crying and cheering, touching the soldiers as if touching hope itself. For to them, the humans were not conquerors. They were liberators, and with every step they took, the Empire crumbled further. At last, the human fleet surrounded the Imperial Palace, the building that had once been the symbol of unbreakable power. Its walls stood high, its gates thick. But against humanity's wrath, they were nothing. Admiral Hawley stood before his commanders, his voice quiet but filled with steel. "This is not about conquest. "Not about power," he said. "This is about a child." And with those words, he gave the order. The palace gates shattered under the fire of human cannons. Walls fell, towers cracked, and the throne itself shook. The emperor sat frozen, his guards long gone, his crown slipping from his head. As human soldiers stepped into the throne room, the emperor's voice cracked. "Spare me. I will give you tribute. I will surrender the galaxy. I will." But Admiral Hawley stepped forward, his face like stone. "No tribute can pay for what you took," he said. "No surrender can undo what you did." His hand lifted, his voice rang across the chamber. "This is justice." The final barrage fell. The palace collapsed in fire and thunder. The emperor's scream was lost in the roar of destruction. And with that, the empire was no more. The throne world burned. Its banners fell. Its people rose. The galaxy watched in silence, for they had witnessed something no one thought possible. The fall of the greatest power in history, brought low not by another empire, not by greed, but by the wrath of a people who had lost a child. Above the burning capital, the fleet of Earth stood in silence. No cheering, no celebration, because this was not victory. This was reckoning. The child's face glowed on every ship, on every banner, in every heart. The message was clear. This war had never been about conquest. It had been about justice. And justice had been served. Asterisk. A new law. The smoke still rose from the ruins of the imperial palace. The throne world lay in silence, its towers broken, its banners torn, its ruler gone. The people who had once bowed to the empire now stood free, and above them the fleets of Earth hung like watchful guardians. Across the galaxy, the news spread faster than light. The empire had fallen. The chain that had bound worlds for centuries was broken. From distant mining colonies to rich core planets, the whispers turned to shouts. The empire is dead. The humans have won, but humanity did not call it a victory. Admiral Marcus Hawley stood before his fleet, his face grim, his voice steady. "This is not conquest," he said. "This is justice." The soldiers nodded, the civilians cheered, but in their hearts they all understood. They had not fought to rule. They had fought to end cruelty. And now a new question rose in every heart. What comes next? On Earth, billions poured into. The streets, they carried candles, banners, and portraits of the fallen child. His face was now carved into monuments, painted on walls, and carried into the stars. His name was spoken, not with grief alone, but with pride, because it was his courage, his defiance, his death that had changed the galaxy forever. At the sight of his small shrine on Arden Prime, people gathered from every colony. Aliens came too, those freed from the Empire's rule. Together they placed offerings before the wooden toy soldier, still resting at the center, and above it a new stone was raised. On it were carved words in every known language. No one harms Earth's children and lives. This law spread faster than fleets. It spread through whispers, through treaties, through vows. Worlds that had once feared the Empire now feared humanity's promise. Not a promise of domination, but a promise of wrath, because the galaxy had seen what humanity would do for one child, and no one wished to test it again. The Galactic Council, shaken and silent, sent envoys to Earth. They begged to negotiate, to form alliances, to avoid the fire. For the first time in history, Earth did not kneel to the Council. Instead, Earth built its own council, a new gathering, not ruled by fear but by voices. Every human colony was given a seat, and even alien. Worlds once enslaved were invited to join. The age of one empire ruling all was over. The age of many voices rising together had begun. Still, some feared humanity. They whispered in the dark. If they could destroy the Empire, they could destroy us too. But those whispers were met with another truth. Humanity did not fight for conquest. Humanity fought when pushed beyond reason. And though their fire was terrible, it was not endless. It burned only when cruelty demanded it. Admiral Hall, old and weary, walked through the new halls of Earth's council. He stopped before a great wall of names. Every soldier, every civilian, every child who had been lost in the war. At the top of the list was the child of Ardent Prime. Hale bowed his head, his voice a whisper. You were the spark, and we were the flame. Behind him, young soldiers stood silent, saluting, for they knew the story would be told for generations. The galaxy itself seemed to breathe again. Where there had been silence, now there was song. Where there had been chains, now there was freedom. Where there had been despair, now there was hope. And at the heart of it all was humanity. Not as conquerors, but as guardians. Legends spread quickly. Some said the boy's spirit walked among the fleets, guiding them. Others said his wooden toy soldier was carried on every ship, a reminder of why they fought. No matter the tale, one truth was shared, that the smallest defiance could change the largest empire, that a single child could awaken the wrath of a world, and that wrath could reshape the stars years later. When new children played under peaceful skies, their teachers told them the story. They told them of the empire, of its cruelty, of its mistake. They told them of the child, of his courage, of his death, and they told them of Earth, of how humanity rose, and they ended with the words carved into the stars themselves. No one harms Earth's children in lives, the galaxy remembered. The galaxy would never forget. And so a new law was born. A law written not on paper, but in fire. A law carried, not by words, but by wrath. A law that would last as long as the stars burned. Asterisk.